what is the purpose of the Pride Troopers and who are they really supposed to be? Because when Dragon Ball Super introduced Universe 11, we're given the entire group of fighters who all seem to operate under the same concept, which is justice, right? But the series doesn't really spend much time explaining what that organization actually represents beyond the obvious superhero aesthetic. And I think it was, what, 2 episodes of Hit in I can't remember. Either way, I think there's more interesting answer to this question than simply just saying there are a bunch of good guys that fight bad guys. The Pride Troopers are essentially Universe 11's institutional answer to the problem of powerful individuals. They're fighters who have taken their abilities and then they turn them into a responsibility towards the wider universe. And I think that's what separates them from a lot of the fighters we're accustomed to following in Dragon Ball. You take Universe 7, our beloved Universe 7, for example. Its strongest warriors aren't really organized around a common mission. Goku fights because he loves martial arts, Vegeta has his own personal motivations and ambitions, and Piccolo just gradually becomes a protector because of the relationships he's developed and, of course, is fusing with Kami at a point. So even Earth's defenders aren't exactly operating like a formal organization, but the Pride Troopers, they are, and this makes them different. For the Pride Troopers, being powerful isn't simply a personal achievement. You see, there's an expectation that they have attached to it, because if you have the ability to intervene when someone is in danger, then you obviously should, right? And I think that's the philosophy, and it's what personally makes the group very interesting to me, even still to this day, because once you establish that as the foundation, you can then start to ask what each individual member actually thinks justice means. Top, or Toppo, for example, and I know it's pronounced Top, but just either way, he's probably the clearest representation, obviously, of the organization's traditional ideology, right? Because he doesn't treat justice like a costume or like a catchphrase or anything weird like that. It's basically his framework through which he understands his entire existence as a fighter, as a martial artist, as a protector, as a quote-unquote hero. His strength has value because he believes it should be used to protect other people ultimately. I've kind of learned that's really his number one kind of focus there. And I think that's why Top's eventual conflict with the idea of destruction is so important, because he can't understand why you would seek to destroy something instead of trying to create something good. And then you have the moment where he actually then becomes willing to accept the power of a god of destruction, because as desperation kicks in, he decides he wants to choose that path. And then you have this philosophical contradiction kind of sitting underneath his character because of all of the I'm justice and pro-justice and now I'm a destroyer. You're like, really, bro? So I think if his identity, or if your identity is built around protecting people, like what happens when you're given the new ability whose entire function is essentially to erase things, and that's really your number one job. I think that's a much more interesting question than simply saying, oh, Top became stronger because he became a god of destruction. No, there's way more philosophical things behind the layering that I just explained that shows you he was battling with a lot. He didn't want to accept the energy